The FIA has proven to be one of the most inconsistent governing bodies in the world of motorsport yet again, and their latest move after the Austrian GP has proven that all over again. We've witnessed amazing racing in Austria, but it was massively hindered by the fact that most of the drivers were forced to serve 5-second penalties as they didn't respect track limits. But this is just the beginning of the problem. After Aston Martin issued a protest to the FIA for not penalising more drivers, the FIA upheld the protest, and some drivers saw as much as 30 seconds of their time taken away. Why is the FIA applying this nonsense to the sport, and what is the solution to it now that the track has renewed its contract until 2030? In order for us to understand how this rule is messing with the entire sport, we need to first discuss Article 33.3, which says that in a situation in which the car exceeds the white lines with all 4 of its wheels, then the lap time will be deleted. If the car does this 3 times during the course of the race, it receives a black and white flag, a warning that would result in the next breach being penalised with a 5-second penalty on the driver's name. Now, if you consider the fact that Turn 9 and Turn 10 were the ones that got the best out of the 2023 challenges due to the nature of the track and the heavy cars that the drivers are now forced to drive compared to 10 or 20 years ago, it's very difficult to expect that over the course of 71 laps, the car would go out of the track limits only 3 times. To put things into perspective, this is basically 142 times that the car passes through these 2 corners during the race, and 139 times it needs to be precise and within the white lines. Well, why isn't this achievable, you might ask yourself? Not every driver has been penalised with a 5-second or even 30-second penalty after the race, like Ocon, right? But not every driver has the same car. And just like Hamilton said, by adding more front wing to the W14, he lost a bit of rear downforce and had massive understeer in these corners, resulting in him not being able to keep the car within the white lines. Austria presented itself with the same challenge last year as well, but now it seems like the stewards were more than committed to applying these penalties left, right and centre, something that prompted drivers like Norris to constantly comment on the driver ahead of him, Hamilton, exceeding the track limits. But as Hamilton said, it wasn't up to him to control the car due to the setup that his team made, and even if it was, changes to the outlet are bound to happen, and the F1 caravan can't constantly race on the same outlet while applying massive changes to the cars and adding more weight to the challengers. When talking about this, Hamilton elaborated, "I think they probably need to find a new solution for the track. Years ago, when we didn't have the track limits thing, the track was much more enjoyable to drive. It's strange to be driving and have to almost comment on the car ahead, because that's what the team have asked you to do. I think they did it in Austin a couple of years ago. That's not racing, right?" Keep in mind that this happened before the Aston Martin protest, one that saw Hamilton being added a 10-second penalty, and Ocon was penalised with 30 seconds due to the infringements he made regarding respecting the white lines of the track. One couldn't help but wonder, why is this being applied in the first place? It's true that the stewards had a lot of work to do in trying to warn all of the drivers, but dishing out 12 penalties after the race just goes to show one thing: the governing body's incompetence has been shown yet again, and the Formula One drivers are not going to tolerate it anymore. After Aston Martin protested the choice of the FIA to not penalise more drivers from the race, considering that there were many others that committed breaches, the governing body has upheld the protest and investigated everything in further matters. That's why an additional 12 penalties have been added to the drivers almost 5 hours after they passed the checkered flag. Something that does annoy the fans and the entirety of the F1 world, and apart from Ocon and Hamilton, Sainz, Gasly and Sargent were penalised with 10 seconds, De Vries was penalised with 15 seconds, and Tsunoda had an additional 5 seconds penalty to what he already served in the race. For things to be more interesting, the majority of these drivers already had penalties during the race, and in total, Hamilton's penalty has reached 15 seconds of his time, a move that's questionable by the FIA, to say the least. To all the F1 fans out there, I know exactly what you're thinking right now. What the hell? is going on? That is the same question that runs through my mind as well. But it is what it is, and more than 1,200 breaches have been noted by the FIA regarding this matter, which prompts the question, is every driver out there incapable of keeping their car in the white lines? Obviously, there were drivers who managed to get by without a penalty, but that itself is not enough, and therefore the F1 world firmly believes that there need to be changes implemented to the Red Bull Ring with the new generation of cars, because as of now, the racing is ruined as the drivers have to give up lap time in order to respect the limits of the track. There have been some solutions offered by F1 drivers, such as adding curbs on turn 9 and turn 10, and therefore limiting the drivers with a mechanical obstacle that would discourage them from sending the car at full speed into these two corners. However, there are other competitions here, such as MotoGP, that would have a strong vote against this being implemented on the track. According to Wolff, there are two solutions to the current problem with the Austrian GP. As he went on to elaborate, everybody really is in the worst possible situation, with the regulations and the racetrack and the FIA trying to enforce them to the best of their ability. There are cameras and sensors, and they spent some time looking at it, and we did the same back at base, looking at all of the onboards just to make sure that we weren't penalised versus all the other teams. But for the fans, teams and drivers, it's super frustrating to keep those penalties coming. So there's only two solutions. You can either come back to sausage curbs and break the drivers and the cars, or just remove track limits overall and let them race the fastest line. Furthermore, Wolff said that it is in the greater interest of the sport to find a solution for the track because it is one that brings a lot of excitement and a lot of competitive racing every time the F1 caravan visits this circuit. But there seems to be a lot of protest against the track limits, as Horner has expressed his anger against them as well, saying, "I think it needs to be looked at because it makes us look a little bit amateurish. With so many drivers breaking those limits, for next year, there might be a bit of graven on the other side of the curb. It just needs tidying up." Obviously, the times in Formula One have changed a lot, but even with this in mind, the weight of the car has increased to a point at which the safety of the drivers is also brought into question. Apart from all the other FIA's penalties, you could definitely bring up the argument of whether or not the governing body cares about the driving and the excitement factor, or just blindly follows the rules and therefore sucks life out of the sport. Considering the fact that the FIA is really not known for listening to the drivers and the team owners, I doubt that there will be many changes made at this circuit, but 1,200 breaches are just way too much. And with how the car has changed over the previous 2 years, it's safe to say that there needs to be something that could be done over this matter. Likely that would be at the expense of the drivers, but regardless, it's better to add more time to the quick laps than to constantly risk having a 5-second penalty looming over your head. Overall, it seems like the governing body is not ready to get out of the negative spotlight in 2023, and now it's up to the drivers and the team owners to push for changes after the most recent bombshell by the FIA. At this point, it's laughable that times are being changed 5 hours after the race has ended, but this is the reality we live in, and for the betterment of the sport, I hope something will change, just like Wolff and Horner proposed. What do you think about the latest blunder by the FIA? Let us know in the comments below.